The story begins in a baby nursery. A baby lay there, confused, wondering why his body felt so heavy and the surroundings were so noisy. He wondered if maybe he was in hell. No, this was the grand estate of the Baskerville family. He realized he had regressed all the way back to infancy. Hugo Baskerville, the family patriarch, looked down at the infants with disdain, calling them insignificant brats. He decided that there weren't any special children here, just trash. He observed that the trash was quieter than usual. Hugo ordered the children to be moved to the Cradle of Swords. Meanwhile, Vikir's eyes glowed with hatred as he recognized Hugo as the main culprit of his framing and execution. Vikir recognized the man with black hair and piercing red eyes. It was Hugo Les Baskerville. He realized that this was Hugo in his younger days, and that he, Vikir van Baskerville, had regressed to when he was a baby. He remembered his past life as a hound, born from an illegitimate family and trained in a poor environment. A hound had to be devoted to his mission, taking care of all kinds of dirty work, including assassination, intelligence, ambush, and threatening. Everything was done to make the Baskerville family the best of the 7 families. He thought back to why he had stayed loyal to the Baskerville family. It was simple. He had wanted to be acknowledged by the family and by Hugo. 10 years after the gate to the demonic realm opened, the fight against the demons ended with the humans being victorious. But the reward that was given to the loyal hound who served the family his whole life was being put down. It was a 4-word saying that meant killing and eating the hound that hunted the rabbit prey. There was one reason why he was being executed: the fact that the hound knew too much. He vowed he would never live that life again. He wanted to take his revenge right now, but in a newborn's body, he realized he couldn't do anything. Vikir knew that being moved to the Cradle of Swords was a good opportunity to become strong, and that right now, he needed to become stronger. The Cradle of Swords. Children born into the Baskerville family needed to go through one trial. They were thrown into a maze of swords, and after going through that, they needed to get to the Styx River to be examined for their talent. The Styx River was legendary, a river that could turn the bodies of children into iron, but there was a limit to how many children it could affect. To reach the Styx River first, he needed to head straight out of the battle-mark-stained wall of blades. Vikir recalled how in his past life, he was betrayed by his siblings and couldn't even receive the river's blessing. He declared that it would be different this time. He would monopolize the Styx River's blessing for as long as he could. Vikir plunged into the Styx River, determined to claim its power for himself. The water seeped into his body and bones through his cuts. He realized that having a great start made all the difference. He knew he needed to endure for as long as he could, no matter how painful it was. His retainers shouted at him, urging the young master to come out of the water immediately, fearing he would die if he stayed underwater any longer. Hugo Baskerville watched with amusement. He asked John Barrymore how long Vikir had been in the river, and the head butler informed him that it had been about 7 minutes. Barrymore nervously pointed out that Vikir might die. Hugo then told his son that he could come out now. He recognized Hugo's voice, but Vikir steeled himself. He thought that Hugo wouldn't think he would come up so easily, so he needed to absorb as much as he could until the end. He coughed, struggling to stay submerged. Vikir knew he must endure it. A hand plunged into the water, reaching for him. Hugo looked down at the child he held above the water, remarking that even the Styx River wasn't enough for him, and that he had even drank from it. He noticed that the child already had teeth. The camera zoomed in on Vikir's face. Hugo smiled grimly, thinking that a very greedy son had been born, and that he should enjoy this as much as he could. Vikir knew that right now, he needed to use this time to sharpen his canines silently. He vowed that when the time came for him to rip his master's head off, the Baskerville family would disappear into history by his, Vikir van Baskerville's, hands. Hugo Le Baskerville's bastardized son, Vikir van Baskerville, had a long road ahead of him. At 8 years of age, he was talented enough to be called a genius, but he was considered ordinary in his family. At 20 years of age, he took on assassination, espionage and conquest-type missions. At 29 years of age, he felt that he had reached his limit in swordsmanship compared to those of direct lineage. At 30 years of age, the gate leading to the demonic realm opened, marking the beginning of the demon clan's invasion. At 35 years of age, he endured through the era of destruction, slaughtering monsters left and right. At 39 years of age, the long war finally came to an end with the victory of the human realm. At 40 years of age, he was rewarded for his loyalty. His reward for loyalty was defamation, false accusation, and the guillotine's blade. He found himself in a nursery and realized that he had successfully absorbed the Styx River. That meant he now had a better starting point in life than before. Vikir let out of relief. Maid wondered why Madame would want to put something like that in young Master Vikir's bed. Vikir thought that no one would give him, a bastard, a present. He looked over to see what it was. It was a brutal mamba. Vikir realized that someone had sent the rare vipers to assassinate him. He figured that only a few in Baskerville would be called Madame, And whoever it was, she was probably trying to reduce competition. He realized that these vipers could kill all of the babies in the nursery. Vikir grabbed the vipers with his bare hands. He smirked, thinking this was to be expected of the Baskervilles. Vikir vowed to bring the entire family down with his own 2 hands. The next day, the Baskerville family members were alerted and rushed to the scene, their faces etched with disbelief. The people of Baskerville were shocked when they found Vikir sleeping peacefully next to the dead vipers. All the nannies on shift that night were tortured and executed, but the reason for the viper's appearance remained unknown. Only the young hound, Vikir, knew the truth. 8 years later, the instructor addressed the young masters, announcing that today's lesson would cover the levels of swordsmanship. The instructor explained that if one couldn't yet imbue the sword with mana, they were considered a sword beginner, but the level at which they could infuse the blade with a little bit of mana was called sword expert. When the blade emitted mana in liquid-like aura form, that was sword graduator. And lastly, the level at which the aura was solid and the form could freely be changed was called sword master. The instructor revealed that the strongest of the Baskervilles, Sir Hugo, was at that level. Vikir realized that Hugo was already a sword master at this point in time. He knew he needed to regain the power he had prior to his rebirth, before the coming-of-age ceremony. The instructor noted that young Master Vikir was lost in thought again. The instructor acknowledged that the boy with black hair had earned a strong physique by diving in the Styx River for 7 minutes, and that he only needed to teach him one thing for him to learn 100. He added that he was much more talented than the others. The instructor believed that the patriarch would be very happy to know of his progress. The boy with black hair wondered how many years he would need to kill Hugo. Meanwhile, down the hall, 3 boys with blonde hair smirked. The boy with black hair was suddenly confronted by the blonde-haired boys. They had been hearing some weird rumors about him. The blonde-haired boys told the boy with black hair that they had heard he dove in the Styx River for 7 minutes, and strangled 2 vipers to death when he was a baby. The boy with black hair recognized them instantly. They were the ones who had stabbed him when he was running away after being defamed. The 3 boys were known as Hugo le Baskerville's Trident. They told him to stop lying. 3 boys stated that they didn't like him. He knew that in 10 years, they would be a real pain in the ass, and he thought it might be a good idea to put them in their place now. Vikir stared down at the blade pointed towards him. The blonde-haired boy questioned if it was true that if one stayed in the Styx River for a long time, their body would become like steel, making them invulnerable to blades. He asked if that meant he wouldn't die even if he stabbed him. Another boy with blonde hair called the boy with black hair Loburo, and stated that he would eat his head if he endured for 3 minutes in the Styx River. Vikir thought that children were cruel, and decided to play along for a bit, knowing there was no way a legend like that was true. The 2 blonde-haired boys watched Vikir closely, commenting that he was still doing well. After 10 minutes had passed, the boy with blonde hair looked shocked, grabbing Vikir from behind. He stammered that it wasn't fun anymore, and told the others to let him go. Vikir suddenly stood up, spitting at the other kids, who asked what he was doing. Vikir, with a ferocious look in his red eyes, questioned if they didn't say they would eat their hand. The blonde-haired boy denied that he was scared of Vikir, despite missing a finger. One of the boys, trying to calm the situation, suggested that they go to the priest to get his finger put back on, wondering who let them go. The boy with blonde hair and red eyes glared intensely, calling Vikir a bastard as he held a knife. The boy with brown hair was on top of the blonde, pummeling him. He shouted, asking if the blonde had forgotten that they were a year older than him. The blonde-haired boy looked back at him with red eyes, tears welling up. He retorted that they seemed to be the ones who had forgotten. Vikir stood over the fallen boy, who screamed in pain. He declared that in Baskerville, age didn't matter as long as you had strength and talent. Vikir's eyes glowed with menacing intent as he promised to see this through to the end with his brothers. The blonde-haired boy's face contorted in horror. He realized that the rumors were true. Vikir unleashed a devastating blow, and the scene faded to white. Vikir declared that he wouldn't let them leave the room, and they would have to live with the discomfort of their own bodies at that rate. He offered to be generous and let one of them leave right then, prompting a surprised reaction from the blonde-haired boy. The other boys, battered and bruised, were desperate to know which one of them could leave. Vikir told them that they would have to decide that for themselves, as brothers. He added that he couldn't wait long, so they needed to decide quickly. Vikir asked if at least one of them shouldn't live. He stood amidst the scattered papers, his red eyes gleaming menacingly. Meanwhile, Baskerville clan Majordomo John Barrymore reported to the Patriarch about a brutal situation with the Morgue clan in the Ruby Mines, with the Morgue clan claiming the Ruby Mine as their territory. The Patriarch responded that an opportunity to discuss that matter would come soon, as the Morgue clan would seek them out first. He then inquired if there was anything else to report regarding the interim evaluation of the juvenile fortress. The Baskerville clan patriarch, Hugo le Baskerville, learned that Master Vikir had scored the highest on the written exam and responded with a hint of intrigue. Hugo inquired when the practical exam for the children at the juvenile fortress would take place, and he was informed it would be in 5 days. He also learned that the Guardian Knights had vacated the premises in preparation, so the fortress was completely vacant. The older man said that there was one matter he needed to inform him about regarding the juvenile fortress. He revealed that there had recently been a big fight amongst the young masters. Hugo asked how many of them had died. The report detailed the aftermath of the young masters' brawl. Master Highborough's teeth had been completely damaged, Master Middleborough's jaw had been smashed in, and Master Lowborough's left index finger had been amputated. The speaker assured Hugo that they had recovered their health since being treated, but the psychological damage seemed significant. He added that they wouldn't have fought amongst themselves since they were so close, but there had been some friction with another young master. The one who wounded the 3 young masters was the 8-year-old young master. The speaker clarified that it was Master Vikir, the one with the highest scores on the written exam. Meanwhile, the young Vikir stood silently, a slight smirk playing on his lips, as if he had anticipated this outcome all along. Vikir greeted the man with black hair and a light beard, addressing him as Patriarch. Hugo acknowledged the title, accepting his role. Hugo revealed that he had heard about Vikir's fight with the 9-year-old triplets in his senior class. Vikir responded that if he was referring to those brothers, they had received proper medical treatment since then. Hugo clarified that he wasn't talking about physical disabilities, but rather the disability of the heart. Hugo explained that since that day, the triplets had been eating separately, and no longer spoke to each other. He lamented that their combination technique had been quite decent, but now their relationship was completely torn apart. Vikir's expression was one of serene indifference, as he was asked if he thought his actions were wrong. Hugo, standing nearby, questioned what he thought he had done wrong. He pointed out Vikir had turned his brothers into a total mess. Vikir's eyes glowed red as he declared that he was stronger, and he couldn't understand how the stronger person could be wrong. Hugo responded that his brothers had come to him, stating they would graciously forgive him, yet Vikir still didn't feel an ounce of guilt. Vikir's red eyes glowed with inner fire as he thought about his brother's supposed forgiveness. He realized that this was a memory from before his regression. He recalled the youngest daughter of a family ruined by the Baskerville clan had once paid Hugo a visit. After many years, she had become a nun and offered him forgiveness and a mass. Vikir remembered Hugo's response after that mass. He believed forgiveness was just an excuse made by the weak who couldn't seek revenge due to their lack of strength. Hugo Baskerville's red eyes glowed with inner fire. Hugo declared that only the strong would reign supreme and that weakness was a sin, confident that Vikir understood the family motto very well. He then called for Barrymore, who responded with a respectful "Yes, my lord." Hugo gave the order to allow Vikir to take whichever snack he wanted from the food storage. Vikir requested just enough food to sustain him and politely asked for chocolate, thanking Hugo for his generosity. Hugo simply acknowledged him as his son. Hugo instructed him to do well on the upcoming interim evaluation. Hugo added that Vikir shouldn't lose to the direct descendants. Chef confirmed that this was the infamous chocolate enjoyed by the Gurmans of the Morg clan. Vikir specified that he didn't want anything processed, only the cacao beans, the ones with a rich aroma. The chef stammered, surprised by the request for the raw beans. He held up the brutal beans, known for their rich aroma, explaining that one bean could produce 100 liters of chocolate. The chef watched Vikir with a puzzled expression, thinking to himself that he must really love chocolate to eat such bitter beans on their own. He figured that within the restrictions the patriarch had set for him, Vikir had found a method to have as much chocolate as he wanted. The chef exclaimed at Vikir's apparent brilliance, asking if he wanted them to process the beans and send them to his room. Vikir declined, stating he would take them as they were. Vikir did not want the chocolate to eat it. Vikir knew that the brutal beans would be used during the practical exam within 5 days. And on that day, a huge catastrophe would occur. It would be a catastrophe unlike anything the Baskerville clan had ever seen before. In this world, the Baskerville family is known as the Berserker family, and their children undergo a rigorous early education. From their first steps, they are forced to run up steep mountains to build stamina. They are forbidden from lying down or resting on their stomachs except during designated times. When it's time to sleep, they must rest alongside the corpses of monsters in order to adapt to harsh environments. Once they reach 8 years old, the young hounds begin their deadly evaluation. This is why the Baskerville family is called the Berserker family. It was finally the day of the practical evaluation, a survival exam that would test the young hounds' skills. The young hounds gathered at the Le Rouge et Le Noir mountain, a monster-infested area on the outskirts of the Baskerville territory. Baskerville family instructor, Shadow Dog Pavlov Van Baskerville, began to explain the basic contents of the practical evaluation to the young masters. He explained that they needed to survive for a month, hunting large and strong monsters, stressing that they needed to be mindful of these 2 conditions to survive. Pavlov Van Baskerville continued to explain the scoring system for the survival exam. Surviving earned 10 points. While surviving without becoming disabled was worth 30. He added that if they managed to fail another young master and survive, they would receive 50 points. Defeating a monster and surviving would earn them 70 points, and fulfilling all the above conditions would grant them 90 points. Pavlov warned them that dying would result in 0 points and reminded them of Hugo Baskerville's lesson: a swordsman dies the moment they become arrogant. He advised them not to exit the designated area, as Le Rouge et Le Noir Mountain was a restricted zone with many undiscovered dangers. He recommended they stay within the area where the monsters had been subjugated. Pavlov had warned the examinees that shadow dogs, also known as guardian knights, would be observing and grading them during the survival exam. 2 of the boys whispered about Vikir, noting that he had survived for 7 minutes in the Styx River and had even killed 2 poisonous snakes in the cradle. They also mentioned rumors of him receiving full marks on the theory exam. One of the boys wondered if Vikir would perform as well in the practical aspect of the exam. Vikir stared up at Le Rouge et Le Noir Mountain, thinking it had been a while since he'd been there. The man announced that the exam would begin at the sound of the bell. The bell rang, and a voice echoed, wishing the young masters fortune. The examinees plunged into the vortex, ready to face the dangers of the survival exam. One of the boys with blue hair knew he had to hurry and find an advantageous position. He decided to head to a spot he'd seen in last year's exam. Another boy, watching him leave, scoffed. He figured there was no way the blue-haired boy could survive alone, so he decided to follow him and take whatever he found. The supervisor watched the examinees disappear into the forest. He commented that the shadow dogs would do their best to keep casualties to a minimum. Nearby, a hooded figure observed Vikir heading towards the restricted area and wondered where he was going. Another supervisor watched with interest, wondering if Vikir was the genius he had heard about. He looked forward to seeing the skills Vikir would display. Vikir scanned the area, wondering if he had arrived at the right spot. Vikir noted that the ground was soft and decided he would be living there for the time being. He thought he should relax and take a break. The hooded figure seemed surprised by Vikir's statement. Meanwhile, Vikir began to train, preparing for the trials ahead. Vikir lay back, seemingly relaxed as he looked up at the sky. In the distance, 2 figures clashed swords. Meanwhile, a hooded figure watched Vikir from afar, wondering how long it had been since the boy had rested while digging a hole. They also noted that he was hunting for food and equipment. The figure wondered if the rumor about Vikir being a genius was fake. If he was just going to hide, there was no need to observe him. Finally, the hooded figure left Vikir to his own devices. The crackling fire brought back memories for Vikir. One of the men explained that cacao beans were used to make fish less fishy, and that brutal beans, with a high concentration of cacao, were the best. Vikir stared intently into the flames. He noted that the one who had been interfering was finally gone, and he had finished everything he needed to prepare. Vikir stared into the flames, a predatory glint in his eyes. He wondered if he should begin his hunt now. A few days later, he found himself inside the restricted area. He knew that from this point onwards, it was the unknown restricted area, but he recalled casually exploring this place during his scouting days. A burning smell pierced his nose, the scent of burnt tree roots filling the air. He was sure that the guy's habitat was around there. He found it, the burning stool. He knew that there was only one monster around here that had that kind of dropping. Vikir thought that these were annoying in his scout days, but seeing it like this, he was actually happy. It was a hellhound. The hellhound roared, its maw glowing with intense heat. Before him stood a hellhound, a monster that had swallowed the hellfires of the oil world. Vikir knew that in his past life, he was barely able to defeat one of these at 18 years old, and being 8 years younger now, it was impossible for him to defeat it alone. However, he knew of a way where even a child could take on a hellhound. He knew the hellhound's first weakness. Vikir stared up at the hellhound, his mind already formulating a plan to exploit the monster's weaknesses. He knew the hellhound's first weakness was that they could only move in straight lines and found it difficult to suddenly change directions. He realized the hellhound's second weakness. Strangely enough, lookout monsters were unable to cross water, even if it may be a very shallow depth of water. He knew that the water would slow the hellhound significantly, exposing a weakness common to all canine monsters. The hellhound roared, opening its mouth as it charged forward. Vikir watched as the hellhound got closer. The hellhound snarled, its eyes fixed on Vikir. Vikir knew that the cacao would first affect the hellhound's stomach and heart, but its hard ribs would protect those organs. He realized he needed to aim for the weak spot where the ribs weren't present. The answer was the kidney. Vikir plunged his sword downwards with deadly intent. The hellhound convulsed as the energy surged through its body. As Vikir defeated the hellhound, he felt an energy called XP accumulate in his body, making him stronger. He noticed that his short sword felt lighter than before. He realized that at this rate, he would be able to catch up to where he was before his regression before he even came of age. He wondered what kind of expression Hugo would make when an 8-year-old child brought back a monster with a risk rating of B+. Vikir grinned, knowing that he had basically secured the position of first place in the practical test. He had already decided what reward he was going to ask for. Vikir knew what reward he would ask for, an enormous prize he would have never dreamed of requesting in his past life. He resolved to take that for himself, something whose true value was unknown to anyone in this era, and then he would take its head. The hellhounds howled in fury. Vikir noted that they must have heard the cries of their fallen comrade. He wondered if they intended on avenging their kind. The hellhounds howled in fury, but Vikir had already struck. He remarked how heartwarming it was, but he never planned to kill only one anyway. He grinned, knowing he still had plenty of cacao beans left. Vikir wondered if they were planning something. The hellhounds seemed afraid of an 8-year-old's bloodthirst, but they would never submit to their prey, even if they were to die. Vikir stood in the middle of the forest, surrounded by the hellhounds he had just defeated. Suddenly, a massive creature appeared, its 3 heads radiating menacing energy. Vikir realized what it was. A Cerberus? Vikir stared up at the Cerberus. An A+ risk rating? He wondered why it was so far down from the 7th ridge. He noticed something was off. The Cerberus was bleeding. Looking closer, he saw multiple arrows and other injuries. Had someone been hunting it? He realized that across the mountain was the territory of the Balak tribe. If the Cerberus had come all the way here, it must have been running for its life. Vikir saw his chance. An injured a ranked monster? He resolved to kill it, no matter what. He had been hiding his power back at the Baskerville household. That included the fact that he had reached a high level of expertise as a sword expert, and that he had mastered the Baskerville third technique. He had already reached the level that other hounds would attain when they turned into adults. With a burst of speed, Vikir lunged at the injured Cerberus, his sword crackling with energy. Vikir lunged forward, his sword crackling with power. He pressed his attack, his eyes fixed on the injured beast. He knew he could do this. He believed that an injured Cerberus was doable. I can do it. An injured Cerberus is doable. Before his regression, Vikir had refined his swordsmanship through war with the demon clans, to the point where there were no unnecessary movements to his techniques, and his body had been strengthened by the river Styx. All the weapons Vikir possessed were working well against the injured Cerberus, or so he thought. In a moment when he had let his guard down, he allowed the Cerberus to use its claws. The Cerberus didn't waste the opportunity, leaping towards the young Vikir. Force of the blow sent Vikir flying backwards, his eyes wide with shock as he crashed to the ground. He coughed, the taste of battle marks filling his mouth. Vikir stood in the forest, the moonlight filtering through the trees. His eyes widened, his face contorted in anger. He wondered if he had lost consciousness after receiving the Cerberus' direct attack. He could feel the pain in his left arm and wondered if it had been ripped out. Vikir's eyes snapped open. He noticed that the Cerberus had stopped its attack, which surprised him. He wondered if it was the river Styx's effect. Vikir was thankful for the river Styx. However, he realized the damage was still there. He knew he couldn't withstand another direct hit. Cerberus loomed over him. A difficult voyage indeed, but Vikir knew that an experienced hunter must find the best way out of situations like this. He realized that the best possible decision right now was to run with his tail tucked between his legs. If it weren't for the injury on its side, he knew he would have been torn apart already. He should thank the barbarian tribe that's over the mountain. He knew if he could just get past that iron fence, he would be out of the restricted area. As long as he could get to that pressure plate, it would be his win. But if he was caught before then, he knew he would die. The Cerberus snarled, its 3 heads dripping with saliva. Vikir scanned the area, desperate. Where was it? It should be around here somewhere. Vikir scanned the forest floor, and his eyes landed on what he was looking for. Found it, he thought. He pushed himself forward, ignoring the pain from his wounds. Just a bit further. Just a bit more. The Cerberus was still on his tail, but Vikir was close. A bit more, he shouted, pushing himself even harder. He slammed his hand down on the pressure plate. Now, Cerberus lunged, its massive paw descending towards Vikir. Each of its claws looked like a dagger. The 3 heads of the Cerberus loomed over him. Vikir coughed, heavily injured from the Cerberus's attack. The Cerberus roared, ready to tear Vikir apart, but Vikir welcomed it to the cradle of swords. He realized that the trap he had originally set to fight the hellhounds would be used to capture the Cerberus instead. Vikir knew that the Cerberus was the same species of cannon monster as the hellhounds, and the brutal bean essence he spread on the wooden spears would act as poison for them. The Cerberus snarled, its massive teeth bared. Vikir smirked, realizing that the Cerberus was a high-ranking demon. He figured it wouldn't die instantly. He unleashed a powerful kick, sending a surge of energy towards the beast. The Cerberus braced itself against the incoming attack. It snarled menacingly, its massive jaws ready to snap. Vikir began to count as the Cerberus stood before him. He continued to count, closing the distance between himself and the injured beast. Vikir finished his count, his eyes fixed on the Cerberus. The Cerberus roared, ready to attack. Vikir let out an of relief. He observed the Cerberus's corpse, noting that it had only taken exactly 7 steps. The rumors were true. Vikir explained that the wooden spear he had tossed was different from the others. He revealed that it was a spear laced with the brutal mamba's venomous fang, which wouldn't let anyone walk more than 7 steps once bitten, adding that it was a good thing he had hidden it when he was younger. Vikir let out of relief, feeling the Cerberus's energy seeping into him. He realized that finally, all 3 heads were dead. He wondered how he was going to carry the corpse back, knowing the cause of its death would be obvious, and considered that the guardian knight who saw him carve the wooden spears might be his witness. But Vikir knew there was something else he had to do. He reasoned that Cerberus were gatekeepers that protected their territories, so it must have been protecting its dungeon somewhere nearby. Before him was the dungeon, a mysterious place that harbored treasure, and sometimes, powerful monsters used them as their lair. Vikir reasoned that since the gatekeeper was gone, the dungeon was probably empty, and by spreading the feces of the Cerberus, he could avoid battling small monsters. He detected dried soil, rotten leaves, moist roots, footprints, and drool, and decided to backtrack it. Vikir strode forward, his boots crunching on the forest floor. Vikir announced that he had found it. This was the dungeon the Cerberus had been guarding. Vikir recalled being here prior to his regression, knowing that it would be discovered in another 10 years, but it would be completely empty. He could sense the mana underneath the rotten surface, and he was certain it hadn't been cleared yet. He noted the lack of light and guessed it was deeper than he thought. Vikir wondered what kind of treasures were waiting inside. Vikir continued deeper into the cavern, his eyes scanning the surroundings. He noticed veins of ruby minerals running throughout the area, realizing it must be connected to the Red All Mountain. Suddenly, he saw a light in the distance. Could it be the entrance to the dungeon? Vikir squinted, shielding his eyes from the sudden brightness. The dungeon's interior was surprisingly bright, illuminated by mana infused into the ruby, creating an ethereal glow. Vikir paused, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. He noticed that someone had been here before him, and they hadn't survived. Vikir noticed the injuries on the skeleton were from stabbings, the dried bloodstains indicating they were old. The letter read that it didn't matter what his name was, he would call himself Cain. He didn't want to dirty the pure white paper with his real name. He noted the handwriting was a Baskerville's, wondering if that meant he was also a Baskerville. He wrote so that future generations would not make the same mistake as he did. The letter continued, explaining that the stone chamber was talked about within the family as a legend. He and his brother Abel had coincidentally come across this place and raided the dungeon, which consisted of countless trials. The letter described how they killed many monsters and arrived at the chamber, only to find the final assignment of this place had tied their feet here for a very long time. Camus Morgue wondered if they wanted the treasure that badly, deducing that the final assignment must be in here somewhere. It had to be this. The inscription read, "When entering, it's 1, but once inside, it's 2. When leaving, it's 1. The two brothers contemplated the ominous inscription, lost in thought. They eventually came to a chilling conclusion. The brothers realized that they were once one in their mother's womb, but separated at birth. To claim the dungeon's treasure, they needed to become one again. That meant only one of them could leave with the treasure. He had killed his own brother after a fierce battle, leaving only one of them in the stone chamber. Despite the sacrifice, nothing changed. He screamed in frustration. They had definitely gone from 2 to 1, so why couldn't he take the treasure? He had killed his brother. After moments of regret, he decided to leave the dungeon, wanting to warn those brave enough to find the place. The skeleton sat slumped against the dungeon wall, a silent warning to leave immediately, and that there was nothing to obtain from this devil's den that only served to taunt humans. The boy with red hair looked around, realizing that others had come all the way here after countless challenges, but left with nothing. He realized the assignment was the same despite the fact that he didn't have a twin. That meant Cain and Abel misinterpreted the text, and he wondered what when entering, it's 1, but once inside it's 2. When leaving, it's 1 could mean. He knew that there was no dungeon that could not be beat, and he would be the one to figure it out. Vikir stared at the skeleton, a sudden realization dawning on him. Huh, he muttered, piecing together the clues. The answer was now clear to him. Ah, I see, he thought, a faint smile playing on his lips. He realized that Cain and Abel had been unlucky, unable to solve the problem because they were too hindered by a fixed idea. He understood that the answer to the riddle lay within the dungeon itself, and the contrast between the dark passageway and the brightly lit stone chamber. Vikir stared into the darkness, his mind racing as he considered the riddle. He realized that the answer would open the final stage of the stone chamber. He looked up, his red eyes gleaming in the light. He realized the answer. It was shadow. Suddenly, a beam of red light shot upwards, illuminating a staircase. The riddle solved, a staircase materialized before Vikir, bathed in an ominous red light. The ascent began, and Vikir's red eyes gleamed with anticipation as he realized he was about to uncover the cause of his brother's deaths. At the top of the stairs, he found a dark sword resting on a pedestal. He wondered if it was the relic of the Devil's Den. An inscription glowed beneath the blade, hinting that only those with Baskerville battle marks could claim Beelzebub. Vikir stared at the blade, illuminated by a sinister red glow. He recognized the name etched beneath it. Beelzebub? He exclaimed, realizing its origin. He recalled seeing an illustration of it in a picture book during his childhood. The gluttonous fly, Beelzebub, he thought. He realized this was an unprecedented great monster that invaded the continent in old legends, the Devil's Holy Constellation, also called the Seven Calamities. He remembered that in order to stop the Seven Calamities, the heads of the seven families stepped up to take on a Devil's Holy Constellation each. He realized that the Devil's Holy Constellation that the first Baskerville Patriarch fought was the gluttony, Beelzebub. The remnants of Beelzebub were said to have been stored in the lands of Baskerville, and its demonic energy lured monsters, a legend that was now largely dismissed. However, the legend was true, and this blade was later taken by the demon clans, resulting in countless deaths among humans on the battlefield. Vikir stared intensely at the blade. He vowed that wouldn't happen in this life, because it was his now. Vikir reached for the blade, a weapon steeped in demonic energy. He gripped the hilt tightly, but the blade seemed to fight back, resisting his control. The demonic energy surged into Vikir's body, tearing through his flesh. Despite the excruciating pain, he refused to release his grip, determined to claim the blade as his own. He realized he had been fortunate to obtain the Beelzebub, a blade crafted from the corpse of a Devil's Holy Constellation. He wondered how much stronger he would become in this life with such a weapon at his disposal. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mom told me I should stop reading and doing these recaps and that it was a waste of time. But I know you guys are different. If you like these recaps, please subscribe and let's prove her wrong. Vikir turned, deciding there was nothing more for him in this place. He wondered if he should head back now. Suddenly, he felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. He realized it wasn't just dizziness, but an intense hunger that gripped him. He wondered what was happening to him. A buzzing sensation emanated from the Beelzebub, almost as if the blade was demanding to be fed something. The hunger pangs intensified, and Vikir clutched his stomach. He felt like his stomach was tearing apart from the insane appetite. He wondered if his sense of smell had become more sensitive because of the hunger, because something smelled delicious. Vikir's eyes widened as he felt a surge of energy coursing through him. He questioned if the energy was telling him there was something to eat nearby. Vikir stared at the corpse. He realized it was the hellhound he had killed before. He watched as the battle marks flowed into Beelzebub. Vikir felt like his stomach was finally finding its place, as if it had been starved for a long time. He wondered if the withering trees and dry land and empty Le Rouge et Le Noir were also caused by Beelzebub's insane hunger. Vikir questioned how much he would have to feed it to sate it. The demonic energy swirled around his hand, pulsating with a strange, almost playful energy. The system screen displayed Beelzebub's information. It showed Beelzebub, the gluttonous fly, with the first slot filled with hemorrhage hellhound. The other two slots were empty. Vikir, with his black hair and red eyes, stared at his hand, wondering if this was Beelzebub's unique skill. He recalled that Beelzebub the gluttonous fly had the ability to turn an opponent's ability into its own. It could practically absorb a limitless amount of skills, and those who had their abilities absorbed were utterly destroyed. Vikir realized that since he was dealing with a corpse, he could only absorb a maximum of 3 skills. He focused on the first skill, Hellhound's Hemorrhage, which could make even the smallest of scratches pull out obscene amounts of battle marks. Vikir, realizing the potential of Beelzebub, thought that if he could steal skills, the possibilities were endless. But as he began to absorb the skills, a voice cried out, telling him to wait. The voice told him that he couldn't eat it all, because it was going to be difficult to explain himself when they checked it later, and it was too damaged. The voice became more insistent, demanding that he stop. The system buzzed, displaying the skills he had absorbed: Incinerate Cerberus, Hemorrhage Hellhound, and Rapid Regeneration Brown Rat Norvegicus. The protagonist was surprised that he also gained Rapid Regeneration. He wondered if Beelzebub had also consumed the brown rat corpse hidden under Cerberus. Vikir realized that getting the Incinerate skill from Cerberus was a huge harvest. He thought that being burned alive was one of the worst ways to die, making it even more foul than the Hellhound's Hemorrhage. He had already finished preparing the demonic creature for the practical exam. Vikir decided to relax until the assessment was over. The young hounds of Baskerville returned after finishing their practical assessment, looking battered but alive. The evaluation followed, and the corpses of the demonic creatures that the young hounds caught were crafted into shields, swords, necklaces, and other spoils to be returned to them. But one of those demonic creature corpses that a young hound brought shocked the Baskervilles who were present. Hugo Baskerville looked up, demanding to know who caught what. The Baskerville clan was shocked to hear that the 8-year-old Vikir van Baskerville had accidentally crossed into an unexplored area during his exam. The man wondered if they were talking about the same Cerberus that even the guardian knights of their clan had a hard time facing. He mentioned that he had been notified that the Cerberus had already been injured by the barbarian tribes and poisoned. The older man replied that nothing else was recorded in the hunting log. He admitted he had tried to ask Vikir about it, but the young master had returned to his dormitory, stating that he was tired. Hugo Baskerville chuckled, thinking that the brat was already so sly. He mused that knowledge was power, and power was one's worth. The older man with white hair admitted he was surprised that such talent came from a young master with the Van name, not La or Le. He asked if the other man really didn't know him. Hugo Baskerville smirked, stating that he was different from the previous clan heads. He didn't care about bloodline when raising a hunting dog. He explained that it didn't matter whether they were from a royal family or a prostitute. All he cared about was their talent and their determination. He added that even weaklings could come from good bloodlines. The older man apologized, wondering if Hugo was being conscious of his second son and secluded training. Hugo Baskerville decided he needed something to lift his mood, and resolved to call young Master Vikir. Vikir stood patiently, waiting to hear what his father wanted. Hugo asked if Vikir had killed a Cerberus during the practical exam, then asked how he had done it. Vikir explained that he had fed it chocolate. The older man with white hair realized that chocolate was practically a deadly poison to dog-type demonic creatures, and that was why Hugo had requested it. He wondered if that was really what a link between a father and son should look like. The man with the light beard questioned Vikir about his lust and forthcoming answers regarding the specifics of his hunt. Vikir stated that it was because Hugo wasn't his master. Hugo asked who Vikir's master was, since, as a member of the clan head was supposed to be his master. He complimented Vikir, saying that he had learned well. As a reward, Hugo declared that the corpse of the demonic creature Vikir had caught would be given solely to him. Since he had placed first in the practical exam, Hugo would grant him a wish. Vikir thought to himself that he had been waiting for this, and with it, he would be able to get everything that he wanted. Vikir stated his wish to enter the 10,000 book library. The 10,000 book library was a massive collection located in the deepest parts of the Baskerville clan's main castle, and one of the biggest in the empire. Vikir knew that only the clan head, the vice clan head, and members of the main house were allowed to enter it, and considered giving up on the idea. He figured he would have to sneak in. He was surprised to hear that he could enter it. Vikir was told that he could read Baskerville's Swordsmanship's 6th Fong, which was located in the restricted area of the 10,000 book library. He was surprised that Hugo would permit an illegitimate child to read the 6th Fong. He knew that there had never been a case of an illegitimate child wielding the name Van ever reading beyond the 4th Fong. Still, he didn't have to be so shaken up, as it was only the 6th Fong. He recalled that currently, Hugo was only at the 7th Fong, but before he regressed, Hugo was capable of drawing out 9 fangs. Vikir hadn't forgotten the scorn he received as an illegitimate child. He vowed that in this life, he would surpass Hugo. Vikir knew he would be able to obtain the swordsmanship scripture, which contained Baskerville's true pure essence. It had been discovered later in his past life and was written by the Baskerville's first clan head, who had killed the 7 calamities. He wondered who was going to give that swordsmanship scripture to him. He realized it would be Hugo Le Baskerville, who would be the one handing it to him. Vikir added that he would be looking forward to it, and wished him good luck. Vikir thanked him, stating that he would do his best to meet his expectations, and that Hugo wouldn't even know the value of the thing he was handing over. The doors to the 10,000 book library stood before him, guarded by 2 sentinels. Vikir stepped inside, gazing up at the vast collection. It was the first time he was seeing it in person. He ran his fingers along the spines, reading the titles. Severing Incisor Swordsmanship, Crushing Molar Swordsmanship, Stabbing Canine Swordsmanship, Double Impaling Snaggletooth Swordsmanship, Lying Wisdom Tooth Swordsmanship. The scripture for every swordsmanship he wanted to learn prior to his regression was all here. Vikir knew that in the Baskerville clan, no matter how much mana an illegitimate child had, they weren't allowed to learn a swordsmanship above 4th Fong. It was a policy within the clan so that the pawns meant to become hunting dogs couldn't bear their fangs to direct descendants that would become the masters. Before him sat a massive tome, chained and locked. Vikir wondered if this was it. He thought that Hugo suggesting a 6th Fong swordsmanship to him was something he could never have dreamt of prior to his regression. He figured that Hugo allowed it because he thought it'd be impossible for an 8-year-old to memorize it in a day. However, before his regression, he had studied the theory behind 1st Fong to 4th Fong swordsmanship like a madman. It was to the point that he started to correctly guesstimate the theory behind the 5th Fong, which he was never taught. He recalled that after drawing the 4th Fong, he had to snap the flow of mana once, which was why he wasn't able to make the 5th Fong. The scripture described Baskerville swordsmanship. Each level was defined by fangs, so level 1 was 1 Fong, and level 2 was 2 fangs. It was characterized by the crimson sword aura expelled while drawing the fangs. However, Vikir, with his signature smirk, declared that he didn't care about the 6th Fong. He revealed that he had a different goal for coming here today, something at an even higher level. Just then, 2 men in uniform noticed him. They asked if young Master Vikir was already leaving. They told him that the swordsmanship scriptures were deeper in, and if he was leaving to grab something he forgot, they would get it for him. Vikir told them that he was done with his business there. Vikir told them they could read more before leaving, but he planned on skimming through other scriptures before exiting, so they could ignore him and get on with their work. As Vikir turned and walked away, one of the men whispered that there should be nothing but miscellaneous scriptures over there, and if it were him, he'd be reading the scriptures deep inside. Vikir thought to himself that they could think whatever they wanted. He knew there was no way they would know that between these dusty, miscellaneous scriptures, a treasure was hidden. He paused, a look of surprise on his face. He had found it, lurking embedded teeth. Vikir stared intently at the book, convinced he had found what he was looking for. He realized this basic scripture for the first Fang was so torn up that even the children of the Baskerville clan wouldn't bother reading it, which was why it was hidden away in the miscellaneous category. Vikir stared intently at the book, realizing he knew the true value of this seemingly worthless scripture. He recalled that before his regression, the Hound unit he was a part of had found a strange relic inside a dungeon near Mt. Le Rouge et Le Noir. It was a single, torn-out page from a swordsmanship scripture. The page was written in Baskerville handwriting, and Hugo had noticed something was off about it, so he ordered his people to search through the entire 10,000-book library to find the matching book. Vikir realized that the scripture was called Lurking Embedded Teeth, personally written by an ancestral Baskerville, detailing the method on how to reach Baskerville's 10th Fang. Hugo, losing his mind over the thought of the 10th Fang, unleashed the hounds, searching for the whereabouts of the remaining 6 pages. Learning that the remaining pages were hidden in each of the other great clans, Hugo almost declared war against them, unleashing the hounds against anyone that resisted. After countless hounds were sacrificed, they were able to offer all the remaining pages to Hugo. The reward for all of the sacrifices was, Hugo told him, "Good job." Vikir thought to himself what a stupid life it was. He knew that Hugo had overcome the wall of the 7th Fang and reached the 9th Fang, using the battle marks and corpses of the hounds below him as fodder, but that wouldn't happen in this life. The hound that fetched all those pages was him, and he remembered the contents of all of the lost pages. But the reason he wasn't able to climb higher than the 4th Fang was because he never got to see the source text. He studied the ancient text, realizing the first step of the 10th Fang was similar in essence to the first. He read that the moment someone showed aggression as they pulled out their sword and drew an arc, all sword paths ended up with the same limitation. He understood why most people would treat this book as lowly and filled with lofty nonsense, but the moment someone put the torn-out pages in their rightful place, the content that seemed like pretentious fabrications turned into a puzzle that depicted an epic painting. Vikir continued reading, thinking that before his regression, he was at the level of 4th Fang in swordsmanship and a high-rank sword graduate in aura. He vowed to become as strong as he was before his regression before he turned 15. The night deepened outside the library window. Vikir closed the book, deciding that should be enough. He wondered if he had focused all day, but thanks to that, he had memorized the book to the point that he could recite it backwards. He thought that he may be unable to draw 10 fangs with the body of a child, but he might be able to reach the 5th Fang now, something he couldn't reach in his past life. Vikir stood in a dark space facing a glowing humanoid figure. Vikir focused his energy, his eyes glowing with intensity. He unleashed the Baskerville 1st Fang. Then, in quick succession, the 2nd and 3rd fangs erupted. He pushed himself even further, manifesting the 4th Fang. Vikir's eyes burned with a fierce determination as he recalled his past life, a life he considered shabby. He remembered working hard to obtain the highest rank graduate aura, only to be looked down upon by the main house. He was unable to learn a swordsmanship fit for it, and he couldn't reach the 5th Fang or higher because he was an illegitimate child. He vowed he would never live such a life again. A powerful aura emanated around him. Hugo Baskerville's gaze intensified, his red eyes piercing through the shadows. A surge of power radiated from him, a silent threat directed at his son. Vikir, feeling the oppressive aura, steeled his resolve. He turned and walked deeper into the 10,000-book library, the scripture he was about to receive fueling his determination. Vikir stared at his hands, acknowledging that it was a bit lacking, but he had still managed to draw the 5th Fang. He felt a warm sensation rising from his heart, almost choking him. He wondered if there were any swords nearby, then acknowledged that in the entire history of Baskerville, the young hound's fangs were growing faster than anyone else's, and they were aimed at his master's throat. The power level of swordsmanship continued to climb. Vikir acknowledged that he had succeeded in drawing the 5th Fang. He knew that if he could just boost his mana, he'd be able to reach the point he was at before he regressed. He smirked, noticing that the mana hole was growing steadily, having increased by an entire dimension through the enlightenment. He realized that the flowing, liquid aura was the mark of a graduate. He had leveled up from a high-rank sword expert to a low-rank graduate, a level he had reached when he was 30 before he regressed, and he had now reached it at only age 8. Vikir knew that a sword graduate was on a completely different level than a sword expert. As the gaseous aura turned into liquid form, its density increased, and its ability to change form became less limited. Vikir realized that he had obtained a swordsmanship greater than the one he wielded before he regressed, one that didn't just stop at the 5th form, but could even reach the 10th Fang, one that had infinite potential. He knew that the stabbing canine he learned before would allow him to become stronger faster, but the limits to its growth were clear. Compared to that, the lurking embedded teeth was a perfect swordsmanship that fused both offense and defense, and had no limit to its growth. Vikir believed that if he just put his mind to it, he'd be able to face even a graduated medium-rank swordsman, with a 100% chance of success if it was an assassination, and 50% if it was a frontal assault. The problem, he thought, came with how much he should reveal to Hugo. The amount of strength he revealed couldn't be too much, or too little. Vikir was confronted by a servant, who apologized profusely for burning the book. He explained that he had been careless, and left a magnifying glass on it. The servant insisted that Vikir had nothing to apologize for, stating that it was their fault for not taking care of him enough. They were relieved that only some random books had been burnt. Vikir confirmed that the books were miscellaneous, and questioned why the knights had the leisure to pay attention to such a small problem, considering the conflict with the Morg clan over the ruby mine. The servant suggested that it would be best to treat the incident as if it never happened, hoping that Vikir could look past it. Vikir turned to leave, telling the servants to keep the incident a secret between them, as he was very busy and didn't want to waste any more time. The servants watched him go, commenting on how good and considerate young Master Vikir was, even thinking of things from his servants' perspectives. Vikir walked down the long, empty hallway. Vikir entered an office where two men awaited him. One of them asked if he had gained any enlightenment. Hugo chuckled, amused by something. The younger Vikir tilted his head, confirming that he had felt something inside the library. He described it as warm and sharp, yet also soft and wave-like, just as Hugo had described. Hugo suggested that it could be aura, the proof that one had truly entered the world of the sword. He explained that even prodigies who trained without rest had to be at least 15 years old to enter the realm of low-rank sword expert. Hugo realized what he was thinking, that Vikir was only an 8-year-old child. Vikir smiled, telling Hugo that he could certainly show his father what it was. They moved to a large arena. A crowd of young Baskerville trainees watched with anticipation. Vikir stood in the arena, ready to show his father what he was capable of. Hugo was then asked how he intended to test the young master's skill, and the man with white hair offered to send in a suitable demonic beast. Hugo confirmed that a demonic beast would be used, mentioning that he had starved it to make it a little more sensitive. A massive demonic beast was dragged into the arena, its body bound in heavy chains. The demonic beast revealed itself to be an orc, its danger level rated C. The sight of the orc shocked the onlookers. One boy exclaimed that it was too much to pit an 8-year-old against such a beast, but added that the guardian knights would intervene if necessary. Down in the arena, Vikir stared up at the monstrous orc. The heavy chains that bound the beast clattered on the ground. With a deafening roar, the orc lunged forward, ready to tear Vikir apart. The orc lunged, ready to end the fight in a single strike, but Vikir stood his ground. He narrowed his eyes, assessing the situation. Vikir unleashed the fifth fang, a concentrated blade of aura that sliced through the air. The spectators gasped as the orc staggered back, clutching at its wound. Kawak! Vikir's blade connected, slicing deep into the orc's foot. The orc staggered backward, a look of disbelief on its face. Quack! Vikir considered that the orc was probably shocked at the feeling of battle marks for the first time. The spectators were in disbelief, wondering how an 8-year-old could accomplish such a feat without mana. Hugo, watching from above, maintained a stern expression. Vikir declared that he would show Hugo what he had unlocked in the library, just as he wished. Hugo's eyes widened, realizing what was about to happen. An aura blade manifested from Vikir's sword. Meanwhile, a hulking monster struggled to its feet, snarling with rage. Vikir, his eyes glowing red, charged forward with incredible speed. Hugo watched the scene unfold, his expression unreadable. One of the spectators commented that it was a low-rank sword expert's aura, congratulating the clan head on the genius of this generation. An older gentleman with white hair declared that there would never be a genius like Vikir amongst all the clans of the empire, and ordered his butler to stop. Looking closer, someone noticed that the orc was a little odd, pointing out that orcs were known for their incredible regeneration, but this one hadn't stopped bleeding. Someone else chimed in, mentioning that Vikir had only won because the orc had been weakened a lot and that he couldn't be honest with himself and be happy, but Vikir cut him off, calling out to his father. Vikir stared up at Hugo, his expression unreadable. Vikir smiled, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He wondered if there was anything stronger than the orc. Vikir knew it was better to reveal a sufficient amount of his strength. He hoped that if he was lucky, his achievements would be recognized, and he'd have a chance to separate from Hugo, perhaps by being dispatched into the wild or enrolling in the academy. Hugo mused that it looked like the orc they went and captured from faraway lands wasn't enough to satiate his son's hunger, adding that what Beecher said made sense, that Vikir was at an age where he needed to continue to experience real combat. Hugo asked the butler if there wasn't an individual from the barbarian subjugation they captured to experiment on some time ago, and the butler confirmed that there was exactly one left. The butler explained that the creature was likely to be very sensitive since it hadn't been fed in some time, and instructed that it be brought over. The students watched with bated breath. Vikir gasped softly. It was a troll. Vikir asked if he could start right away, and Hugo gave his permission. Hugo simply commanded him to begin. With a roar, Vikir charged at the troll, his aura blade crackling with energy. The troll bellowed, its eyes burning with demonic rage as it prepared to meet the attack head-on. Troll, engulfed in Vikir's aura, was struck with overwhelming power. Vikir pressed his attack, his red eyes gleaming with determination. Vikir clicked his tongue, frustrated by the troll's resilience. Two spectators watched with bated breath. They wondered why he didn't attack, seeing a clear opening. Hugo watched with a knowing smirk, thinking that Vikir had made a good decision. He knew that the troll's regenerative ability was outstanding, and if Vikir couldn't inflict a fatal injury in one go, he would only be wasting his energy. That's why strategy was required if he wanted to hunt a troll. The spectators watched as Vikir narrowly dodged every attack. They wondered if he was trying to tire the troll out, and if an 18-year-old could really be making such judgments, like a real genius. Vikir knew the troll was slow, so he didn't feel pressured, but he knew he had to keep up the act. He thought that he could easily kill something like a troll if he revealed his true strength, but that would complicate things. He needed to kill it as naturally as possible. He considered using the Holy Knights against it when it charged at him. The troll fell to the ground, defeated by Vikir's strategy. Vikir slashed at the troll, but he knew the strikes wouldn't be enough to kill it instantly. He realized that it might be impossible to kill a troll using the Baskerville swordsmanship's first fang. Still, he thought it was impressive that an 8-year-old could even do this much. He knew it was impossible to cut through the troll's thick hide with only the first fang. He figured that if he used Beelzebub's hemorrhage ability, the troll would die if he just waited a bit, but that would be meaningless. Hugo, watching from above, told him that he could stop now. He said it could be dangerous if he continued, but Vikir thought he had nearly figured it out. Vikir thought that he might be able to realize something if he fought a bit longer. Hugo watched intently as Vikir fought the troll. Vikir knew that if he couldn't finish the fight with his next attack, he would have to abandon it. Hugo simply told him to continue. Vikir wondered how much power he should reveal. He knew the answer was already set. He wanted to set up a scenario where it looked like he received enlightenment during combat and gained awareness of the next level. The orc's eyes glowed with demonic energy as it roared in fury. Vikir, eyes burning crimson, prepared to strike. He was looking forward to how Hugo would react after seeing this. The orc's expression shifted to one of terror as it saw Vikir's attack. Vikir's blade flashed as he moved in for the kill. Within the Baskerville swordsman clan of battle marks and iron, a person's life was based upon a formula, and Hugo looked like he was starting to realize this. Around age 15 was when one could imbue mana into a sword and exude an aura. At that point, most hunting dogs learned the first fang of Baskerville swordsmanship. But for the first time in Baskerville clan history, the second fang that his brothers would reach at age 18 was achieved by a 15-year-old, and a regular was born. Vikir smirked, knowing he ended up winning. Hugo, however, was visibly angry. The crowd was left wondering what they had just witnessed. 1 week later, Vikir sat alone, picking at his food. He thought to himself that no matter how much of it he ate, he couldn't get used to the random meat stew. He noticed that people had been keeping their distance from him since that day. He figured it was natural, though, because strength was everything. Vikir thought that seeing Hugo flustered was quite a sight. Meanwhile, a servant reported that young Master Vikir had already returned to his room, nervously repeating the news. Vikir knew that the power he'd revealed to the public was Baskerville's second fang, the strength of a medium-rank sword expert, but his true strength was a weak Baskerville fifth fang, the approximate strength of a low-rank graduate. He mused that if he included the troll's skill that he'd obtained, he was probably stronger than a regular graduate, especially with the ultra-regeneration troll skill. Vikir noticed his appetite had definitely increased after getting Beelzebub, before someone interrupted him. 3 of the blonde-haired boys crowded around Vikir, nervously asking if he was alright. He wondered if they were trying to play both sides, or if they were trying to trick him. Vikir felt goosebumps rising on his skin. It wasn't a pleasant sensation. He considered punching them first and thinking later. Just then, an older man spoke to him, calling him young Master Beecher. Vikir turned to see Butler Barrymore standing behind him, and he was visibly shocked. Butler Barrymore spoke to Vikir, his expression serious. He told Vikir that he needed to visit the clan head immediately. The man with dark hair hoped that this year's annual event would end without much issue, noting how the joint training had gone smoothly so far. Hugo Baskerville scoffed, saying that the children of the Morgue clan were overdramatic to call a mere scratch a severe injury. The man with white hair replied that the Morgues were prestigious and classy, being the prestigious Magic clan, while the Baskervilles were the swordsman clan of battle marks and iron. It was said that these two clans didn't always clash from the beginning, and that magic and swords were complementary existences, according to the words of the Emperor 2 generations prior. From then on, the Baskerville and Morgue clans began to proceed with joint training. A ruby mine ownership issue had arisen in the territory between the Baskervilles and the Morgues, skewing the relationship between the two clan heads, but the Emperor's orders forced the joint training to continue. Therefore, Adolf, the younger brother of the Morgue clan head, began to visit the Baskervilles as his agent, revealing that he had heard of a rising star among the Baskervilles. The man with dark hair replied that a genius who might appear once in 100 years from the Baskerville clan was a great fortune to the empire, but it wasn't something to tout so highly. The man with white hair was surprised that the lizard-like bastard would actually react to compliments about his child, finding it unusual. He suggested that they could call this a double fortune, revealing that a genius had also appeared in their Morgue clan. He then called out to Camus, asking her to come in and give her greetings. Hugo watched with a stern expression. The man with white hair introduced the daughter of his elder sister, the clan head Raspain, naming her Camus. He urged the child to greet the clan head. Camus stared intently, accusing the man of being the thief who stole their ruby mine. She demanded that he return the ruby mine to them. Camus demanded the return of her rubies, complaining that she couldn't even conduct her research because they were lacking in rubies. Suddenly, Vikir's voice cut through the room, ordering her to stop. The man with white hair questioned if the Morgue clan didn't teach manners to their children, asking what she thought she was saying to the clan head. Vikir scoffed, wondering if the Empire's sword saint was planning to oppress a mere 8-year-old girl. He added that he guessed the Morgue clan didn't teach their children not to covet what belonged to others. Vikir made his way up the long staircase. Butler Barrymore announced that he had escorted young Master Vikir to the clan head. The clan head examined Vikir, wondering aloud if this kid was the rising star of the Baskervilles. Vikir immediately challenged the clan head, demanding to know what he had just said. Vikir stared in disbelief at the girl with red hair. Camus? Camus? No way. The red-haired girl glared back at him, clearly displeased. What's with your moronic face? The Morgue clan's steel-blooded empress, is this Camus Morgue as a child? He realized that even among the innumerable archmages that originated from the prestigious magic clan, she was known as the genius of all geniuses. During her heyday, she subjugated all the monsters and barbarians on the empty La Rougelette, Lenoir herself. The way she skewered and burned them all to form the imperial borders of ash and battle marks became famous. Not to mention, her beautiful appearance, which enraptured the socialite world, was enough to manipulate the Imperials such that she was called the avatar of authority. He couldn't believe his eyes. This was Camus Morgue, the steel-blooded empress, but in the body of an 8-year-old. She demanded to know why he thought the ruby mine belonged to him, insisting it was hers. Camus accused him of traveling all the way there just to throw a tantrum. Vikir smirked, repeating her words back at her, claiming she was the one throwing a tantrum. Camus declared that she would teach him, in a simple way that even his dog's head brain could understand, why the ruby mine belonged to the Morgue clan, as she prepared a spell. Vikir watched her, a smirk playing on his lips, finding the situation amusing. Suddenly, an intricate ice model of a city appeared before them. Vikir's eyes widened slightly. Camus declared that she would make it simple enough for even someone as ignorant as him to understand. Vikir mused that he thought they would be fighting or something. Camus began to explain that the borders between the Morgues and the Baskervilles, also known as the Joint Security Area, were where the high-quality rubies originated. Camus explained that the problem was that the mine's entrance was in the Morgue clan's territory, but the mine itself was located in the Baskerville territory. She pointed out that the mine was structured so that the Baskervilles couldn't mine the rubies on their own, implying the ruby mine should belong to the Morgue clan. However, she claimed the Baskervilles were forcefully insisting that they were trespassing and interfering with their mining, even rejecting their offer to pay for the territory. The silver-haired man commented on how smart his niece was with her words. Camus stated that rubies were often used as a magical ingredient, and that the Baskervilles definitely didn't need them. She then asked Vikir if that was right. Vikir looked surprised as she mentioned a lease of territory. She added that it seemed the Baskerville clan's biggest tragedy was that no one was idiotic enough to lease out their territory just to earn chump change, and then asked what he thought. Camus heard Vikir's words and pointed out that the Baskervilles had no real interest in rubies, and that they only cared about the territory. That was why they were telling them not to enter. She argued that the only ones upset about not having the rubies were them. Camus declared that she would show them in an even more certain way why the rights to the rubies belonged to them. She pointed out that one side was their land, and the other was hers. Camus placed her hand over the miniature city. Camus looked down at her hand as it reached into the miniature city, and asked whose arm that was. Vikir smirked, amused by her question. He pointed out that she was asking whose arm it was when her arm had passed into their territory. Vikir grinned, declaring that obviously, her arm was now his. Camus' eyes widened, a bead of sweat trickling down her face. She stammered, questioning what he was saying and why she was now his, calling him silly. Vikir grabbed her hand, asking who said she was his. Meanwhile, Two older men appeared to be in a heated discussion, their expressions grim. Kier declared that her arm now belonged to him. Camus looked up, stunned by his words. Below her, the bearded man's expression darkened. Vikir was taken by surprise as the man spoke, while Camus stood frozen in fear behind him. Vikir's grip tightened on the girl with red hair, a chilling glint in his eyes. Camus screamed, desperately calling for her uncle to save her from the brat. A voice boomed out, filled with menace. The white-haired man demanded that he step away from his niece. Camus screamed, telling her uncle that Vikir was hurting her arm. Hugo Baskerville watched silently. The man with white hair demanded to know what Vikir thought he was doing. Vikir smiled, apologizing and saying that his joke had gone too far. He added that these sorts of jokes were normal between brothers in their clan. Camus Morgue was in tears, and her uncle demanded to know why there was even a toy like that. Vikir bowed his head slightly, apologizing to the clan head representative. He claimed he hadn't intended to make her cry, explaining that in the Baskerville clan, they played with toys like these before they even turned one. Hugo Baskerville watched the scene unfold. He questioned if Vikir was being too overbearing for a joke between children, addressing him as the Morgue clan head representative. Hugo revealed that he had already thought of something on his side for the Ruby Mine situation, something he believed the Morgue clan would appreciate. He suggested they hurry up and finish the friendly competition. Camus, tears welling in her eyes, swore she wouldn't forgive him and that he wouldn't get away with this. Meanwhile, Vikir smirked, seemingly unfazed by her outburst. Friendly competition between the Baskerville clan and the Morgue clan was about to begin. Children, aged 8 to 15, gathered to test each other's skills. While the 8-year-olds competed in mana sensitivity or theory, the practical spars between the 15-year-olds typically drew more attention. However, this year, the attention was directed elsewhere. The prestigious magician clan, the Morgue clan, was ready to make their move. The swordsman clan of battle marks and iron, the Baskerville clan, prepared to respond. They followed the Morgue clan's proposal and used the practical training rules to have a spar between the two rising stars of the two clans. Ringing of a bell echoed through the training grounds, signaling the start of the competition. Vikir gripped his sword tightly, warning her to be prepared, as he never went easy in real battles. Camus Morgue began chanting, and magical circles started to appear around her. The spectators watched with growing alarm. They were shocked to see that Camus was performing a quadra casting. The spectators were astonished by Camus' abilities, with one noting that even 15-year-olds struggled to cast 4 spells simultaneously, a feat expected only from the Morgue clan's genius magician. Camus Morgue unleashed her magic, lightning and fire erupting from her hands. Meanwhile, Vikir Baskerville remained unfazed by the display of power, his red eyes glowing. Vikir remarked that while her magic was flashy, she would be better off focusing on each spell individually. Enraged, Camus retorted that he was just a worm who knew nothing about magic. Camus Morgue cast a sand wall in an attempt to stop Vikir Baskerville. Vikir retorted that calling him a worm was a bit much. Camus couldn't believe the sand wall broke so easily, wondering if this was the power of the Baskerville clan's river Styx. Camus realized she had been careless, and looked up, confused. Vikir's eyes narrowed as he prepared his next move. With a flick, Camus Morgue was sent flying backwards, crashing to the ground. The display of power stunned the onlookers. One of the men exclaimed in disbelief that Vikir had just used a forehead flick. Camus, still reeling from the impact, questioned whether Vikir was going easy on her. Vikir smirked, noting that his attack had clearly hit its mark. He taunted her, saying it looked like what he did still hurt. Camus Morgue, tears welling in her eyes, warned him that it was better to end things with her victory before it got worse. She then summoned her magic, shouting sand wall, double, as 2 massive barriers rose up before her. Vikir observed the double sand wall with a raised eyebrow. He wondered aloud if it was pointless since he could just walk around it. Vikir smirked, deciding he would play with her a little. He didn't waste any time breaking through her sand wall defenses. Camus was sent sprawling, barely able to gasp. Vikir reached down, asking her whose hand she thought had broken through the wall. Vikir made it clear that the answer was the stronger one. Vikir stood tall over the fallen Camus Morgue, a smug look on his face. Camus was left coughing on the ground, utterly defeated. Vikir looked down at Camus, thinking to himself that he would kill her. He realized that he had thought she would give up if he hurt her a bit, but it really was difficult to handle children. He knew that if he really wanted to kill her, he could do it in the blink of an eye, but that would cause a huge uproar. He wondered what he needed to do to appease her and calm her down. He determined that in these sorts of situations, the cleanest way to handle it was by using someone else. Vikir moved with incredible speed, his sword aimed at an unknown target. Vikir watched the fight unfold, commenting that he would cut all of the magic. He wondered if he was watching a battle between a stupid magician overusing fire magic and an idiot swordsman cutting magic willy-nilly. Camus, tears welling in her eyes, wondered aloud why she wasn't getting hit. Camus yelled at Vikir to stop running away and fight her, but Vikir remained unfazed. Vikir prepared to unleash his own attack, declaring that they would see if he could cut through this as well. Camus demanded that Vikir come at her, right now. Vikir simply stated her name, Camus Morgue. He advised that she should prepare a protection spell. Camus was confused by his words. The man with white hair shouted a resounding no. Suddenly, an explosion of energy erupted. The aftermath of Vikir's attack left the training grounds in ruins, smoke rising into the air. One of the men cried out in disbelief, wondering how this could be possible, and repeatedly shouted Camus' name. A voice echoed through the smoke, questioning if the speaker had heard correctly. Camus, with a bead of sweat running down her face, wondered what she should do, stating that she was able to block the damage with protection magic. Camus was in a bind. The fire magic had burned all her clothes. She realized that the smoke was covering her, so nobody could see her yet, but if it faded, she would definitely be humiliated. She desperately hoped that someone would help her. Camus was stunned. She looked up, seeing Vikir offering her his shirt, telling her to wear it at least. Camus was baffled by his kindness. She questioned why he was being nice to his enemy, and Vikir responded that he would take it back if she didn't want it. He added that it wasn't like he cared about being shirtless. Camus wondered what was with this guy, and why he was being nice to her. Vikir noticed the battle marks trickling down his arm. He wondered if the idiot knight's sword fragment still had some aura left on it, even after being strengthened by sticks. Meanwhile, two figures emerged from the smoke and debris. Vikir stood beside Camus, who was still sitting on the ground. An older man with white hair looked on with relief. He was glad Vikir was unharmed. As the dust settled, two figures watched intently. They noted that the daughter of Morgue was on the ground, while the young Baskerville was bleeding. They couldn't tell if Vikir had truly won or lost. However, they were impressed by his physique at such a young age, likely a result of the blessing of the river Styx and diligent training. They believed that Vikir had an incredible amount of talent for an 8-year-old. Elsewhere, Hugo approached Vikir in the hallway. He asked how the duel against the young daughter of the Morgue clan had gone. Vikir explained that the duel had been enjoyable, allowing him to better understand the meaning of the event. He noted that a duel against a magician was quite different compared to one against a swordsman. Hugo questioned why Vikir hadn't made a proper attack. Vikir responded that he had only hesitated a little, as he had never fought against a girl before. Hugo told him that hesitation in battle leads to injury and that he should take that wound as a lesson. Vikir was surprised and wondered if Hugo was worrying about him. Vikir reflected that he didn't truly remember what Hugo had been like during his childhood. He had always been a cold, strict, and brutal entity in Vikir's eyes. He recalled a rumor that Hugo's vicious personality stemmed from the loss of his first wife and eldest daughter. Meanwhile, the group continued to walk. Vikir's companion asked what he thought of the ruby mine. Vikir responded that he thought it would be better to simply give it to them, which prompted Hugo to question his reasoning for abandoning the right to mine it. Vikir explained that the Baskerville clan's task was to develop the wilds and widen the border. He stated that the Red Fang Mountains, where the ruby veins flowed, were downstream from Mt. Le Rouge et Le Noir, and that the demonic creatures and barbarian clans there were their problem. Hugo explained that if they used the Morgue clan well, they would be able to minimize the damage they would take for the development, stating that was the correct answer. He continued, saying that after obtaining the rights to the ruby mine, Morgue would station a considerable number of personnel at the site. Hugo added that they just needed to steer the demonic creatures and barbarians to that side, so they could deal with all the troublesome things in one place. Hugo predicted that the ruby would redden by the battle marks of Morgue to a new height. He added that when that happened, even the clan head of Morgue would regret setting foot in their territory. Hugo placed a hand on Vikir's head, remarking that his strategy matched 90% of his own plan. He said that was only natural, as it was the plan that was formed by Vikir himself in the first place, and that he had been the one tasked with dragging the demonic beasts and barbarians towards the Morgues. Hugo continued to explain that they needed to observe the Morgue clan's movements vigilantly, but assured Vikir that he didn't have to worry about it. Hugo stated that the number of hunting dogs they had sent to infiltrate the Morgue clan had steadily increased. They both turned to face the clan head. Camus Morgue, standing beside the clan head, announced that he was here. Hugo asked the clan head if they could have a conversation before he returned. The Baskerville clan head and the Morgue representatives continued their discussion. The Baskerville clan head stated that the Morgue clan representative must have something to say, as they only had one important matter to discuss. Hugo stated that the Morgue clan had thoroughly contemplated how to resolve the ruby mine problem as amicably as possible, and that the territory rent was just one of many items on the agenda. The Baskerville clan head asked what he would gain by opening his territory. The clan head proposed a betrothal, and repeated the word in disbelief. The Morgue clan representative proposed to link the Morgue and Baskerville clans through a boy and a girl, asking which two they had in mind. He suggested his niece, the eldest daughter of Morgue, and the eldest son of Baskerville. He spoke highly of Camus Morgue, praising her looks and intelligence, and assured them that she would be a great partner for the successor of the Baskerville clan, who was called the small son. Hugo Baskerville pointed out that his eldest son was 25 this year, a considerable age difference. Camus Morgue declared that 8 years old and 25 years old was only a 17-year difference, and that much was manageable. She declared that she would not marry someone weaker than her mother. Adolphe Morgue stammered, telling Camus that if she wanted to marry someone stronger than her mother, she would be unmarried for the rest of her life, but he was looking at their potential. Hugo stated that he hated having a big age gap like that, and he wanted someone of his age or younger, adding that this was not a buffet. Camus Morgue declared that she also didn't have a habit of eating whatever was given. She paused, considering something. Vikir's eyes widened as he realized something. Adolphe Morgue hissed that Vikir was not a full battle marks, but an illegitimate half-son, and that a half-breed dragon was still only a half-breed. Hugo Baskerville was enraged by Adolphe's words. Hugo asked his son what he thought about the betrothal. Camus Morgue blushed, her expression unreadable. Vikir paused before answering that it was what he thought. Hugo Baskerville was shocked by Vikir's display of power, sweat dripping down his face. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This brat. Hugo Baskerville asked his son what he thought about the betrothal, suggesting that the individual's thoughts were important in a betrothal. Camus' heart thumped in her chest, her cheeks flushed with a deep blush. Vikir paused, considering his response. He answered that he would do it if that was what Hugo ordered. Adolphe Morgue's name echoed in the air. He was a Sixth Circle master, an extremely strong man in the upper echelons of the Morgue clan, a prestigious and elite magic clan, and also known as a stupidly doting uncle to his niece. The man with white hair grabbed Vikir's face, telling him that being somewhat talented was nowhere near good enough to be Camus' husband. Continued, stating that the arranged marriage was a proposal from within the clan and not his idea, and that he personally didn't find even the legitimate children of Baskerville enough for Camus. The white-haired man wondered why Vikir was so sturdy and demanded that he answer him. Vikir, eyes glowing red, retorted that he had stopped listening because the man had said he wasn't speaking to him. Camus smirked, thinking about how Vikir dared to speak so boldly in front of her uncle, while Hugo chuckled. Hugo asked if he could have a deep talk with Vikir, questioning whether the great magician of the Empire was really planning on interrogating an 8-year-old child, especially one who could become his niece's husband one day. Camus insisted that her uncle was asking for a favor not as a representative of the Morgue clan, but as her uncle, emphasizing that it wasn't what he thought it was. The uncle chuckled, telling his dear niece to stay quiet, explaining that sometimes things like this were in order. The man with white hair asked Vikir what he had to say. Vikir replied that if he insisted, he would comply. The scene shifted to the majestic Baskerville estate, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. Hugo Baskerville and Camus Morgue stood together, observing the scene with keen interest. The man with white hair declared to Vikir Baskerville that he would be testing what he was made of, and to show him everything he had. Vikir replied that he understood, adding that the man would faint if he showed him everything he had. The white-haired man offered Vikir a handicap, as strange energy swirled around him. He was creating a jar, seemingly harmonizing fire, earth, and water magic. Camus Morgue watched with wide eyes, impressed by the display of skill. Finally, he poured water into the jar, completing the preparation. The white-haired man declared that he would duel with a full jar of water balanced on his head, and if Vikir could make him spill even a single drop, it would be his victory. Vikir thought to himself that Adolphe Morgue was a strong man he couldn't even hope to approach prior to his regression, so this was a great opportunity to experience a portion of his powers. From a distance, Hugo watched, and Vikir was sure that Hugo allowed it, thinking the same thing. The white-haired man told him to come at him. Vikir wondered what his odds of winning would be if he faced him with his full strength, pre-regression. Assassination through ambush would have a 50% chance, maybe 10% for a head-on fight. Vikir decided that he didn't need to fight with his all, he just needed to show enough to make Hugo content. He thought it was time to check the skills of a great magician. Camus looked on in shock. The young man with dark hair shouted that Vikir couldn't run head-on into his uncle. Vikir came crashing down, sword drawn, ready to strike. The man with white hair questioned why Camus would reveal that shield magic was the best response against the swordsman. He stated that the shield should be hard to pierce without exceptional aura. The man with white hair asked if it was time for him to attack. Vikir was sent flying backwards by the force of the blast. Hugo, the man with the light beard, questioned why Camus would unleash such powerful magic, something she had never even used during their spars. Camus, with her red hair, was taken aback and wondered whose side she was on. Hugo stated that Vikir was barely dodging the attacks. He added that it seemed he wouldn't have to intervene after all. Vikir pushed forward, his red eyes narrowed with determination. Hugo wondered if this was the full extent of the young hound's skills against the great magician. The man with white hair was channeling a significant amount of energy. He planned to use the fact that Vikir was an 8-year-old regressor, coupled with his pre-regression experience, to bait him into letting his guard down. Vikir's red eyes narrowed, and he realized he might even be able to kill him. Fakir didn't hesitate and launched a surprise attack. He was determined to make the most of this opportunity. The man with white hair smirked, confident that his shield would hold. He declared that no matter how many times Fakir tried, his sword could not break through. Fakir, however, continued his relentless assault. Cracks began to spiderweb across the energy shield. The white-haired man looked on with surprise. He realized that Fakir had been accurately attacking the same spot over and over again, like a precisely calibrated machine, and that his focus and swordsmanship deserved recognition. However, Fakir continued to strike with his sword, red eyes burning with determination. The white-haired man stated that this was no different than trying to break a stone wall by throwing eggs. He added that Fakir should have taken the durability of his shield and sword into account. The man with dark hair admitted that there was merit in being stubborn and trying to force it through, but Fakir should consider his opponent carefully when using such tactics. Camus, standing beside him, gasped. The white-haired man declared that Fakir had talent, but was still greatly lacking to be betrothed to his niece. He paused, surprised. He was shocked as the liquid from the jar poured over his head. He realized that a piece of Fakir's sword had broken through the jar. He decided that was enough. Fakir smirked, asking if he needed to spill more out of the jar. Camus' eyes widened in surprise. She wondered if the fact that Fakir beat her uncle meant marriage? Hugo questioned if it was merely a coincidence, or if the broken piece of the sword conveniently hitting the jar was intentional. The boy with black hair and red eyes smirked, revealing his name, Fakir van Baskerville. The boy with black hair and red eyes smirked, thinking that he might be raising a much more sly hunting dog than he originally thought.